This is what happens when a pilot lies about his ability to fly a plane. On the 7th of September, the Yak 42 charter flight, which was carrying players and coaching staff of a professional ice hockey team, crashed during takeoff in Russia. The pilot had used falsified documents to obtain permission to fly the aircraft, and right after takeoff, he realized his carelessness had put his life and the life of the others on the plane at risk. When he realized he had lost control of the entire situation, he finally said, "That's it, we're f***," and the plane came crashing down. All 45 people on board were killed. The captain gazed at the breathtaking sunset while piloting his plane. The vibrant colors painted across the sky were mesmerizing, and he felt a moment of peace, unaware that darkness was about to descend upon his flight.
8303 approach. Yes, sir. Appears to be turning left. We'll proceeding back, sir. We have lost engines.
Out of nowhere, the tranquility was shattered. The captain made an urgent call to the control tower, his voice tinged with panic. He quickly informed them that the plane's engines had malfunctioned in mid-air, putting everyone on board at risk.
Confirm you are carrying out belly landing. Runway available to land at 25. Roger. Clear, Mayday, Pakistan 8303. Pakistan 8303, Roger.
With growing urgency, the captain called for help, signaling that a serious, life-threatening emergency was unfolding. Despite his best efforts to manage the situation, the plane began to lose altitude rapidly. Moments later, the aircraft tragically crashed to the ground, resulting in the loss of many lives on that fateful day. This plane accident has a very shady conspiracy theory around it. Was the plane deliberately brought down by the Russians in an act of political assassination, or was this all an actual accident? This crash happened on the 10th of April 2010, and it ended up killing all 96 people on board, which included the President of Poland, his wife, the Chief of the Polish General Staff, and other senior Polish military and government officials. Many say the crash was as a result of the thick fog which blocked the view of the pilot. Others say it was an assassination. As the plane got closer to the ground, it struck trees, rolled, and crashed into the ground. The pilot yelled his last words as he realized they couldn't be helped. Things can really go from good to terrible in minutes, especially when you drive an aircraft, and this pilot just doesn't know that his day is about to take a dangerous turn. This terrifying voice re-recording starts with a pilot giving directions to land his plane. He tells his co-pilot that he is clear to land on the left and also clear to land on the right. The flight tower then warned him not to land on that runway because it was still on maintenance, but the pilot ignored their warnings and tried landing. But little does he know that danger awaits. Just as he is about to land, the pilot is heard screaming and shouting as his plane comes in contact with the vehicle of a maintenance worker on the runway. The collision caused the plane to go up in flames, and almost everyone on board lost their lives, including the maintenance worker who was in his car. Sometimes you'd wonder why pilots go through such rigorous trainings, but it's to prevent accidents like these. All started out good and fine as the pilot of the East Coast Jet's Flight 81 tried attempting a go-round at Owatonna-Degner Regional Airport near Owatonna, Minnesota. The go-around didn't go as they planned because the plane overran the runway, hit the landing antenna, and crashed, killing all 8 passengers who were crew members on board. The pilot tried all he could, but at the end he unfortunately lost. The pilot got into his aircraft ready to take off, but little does he know about the danger that lays ahead. This captain had to drive a distance on the runway just before his plane would be able to lift off, but as he was driving on the runway, he noticed a faulty engine and then tries his best to put the aircraft at a halt, but it wouldn't just stop. The pilot could be heard shouting, "Full power," as he tries to put his aircraft to stop, but he couldn't, and his plane kept on moving even after it reached the end of its runway, causing a major crash. Any little mistake in air traffic can lead to a very deadly crash, and this particular crash proves it. This crash happened as a result of an air traffic mistake. As the domestic passenger flight flew from Brazil to Rio de Janeiro, it collided mid-air with a business jet flying on an opposite direction. It was concluded that the accident was caused by air traffic control errors, combined with mistakes made by the American pilots on the business jet. Sadly, the 154 passengers and crew members of the flight all died. This captain's plane was destined for a smooth ride, but what happens to it mid-air leave a terrible mark till today.
182 cleared to land. 182 is cleared to land.
Just as the pilot was sailing mid-air, his plane then collided with another jet aircraft, making the pilot lose control over his plane and signaling heavy danger. He is heard communicating with the control tower and telling them that he is going for an emergency landing.
Sorry, we're going down. This is PSA. Okay, we'll call equipment for you. Exactly.
He notices that he can't control the plane anymore and signals to the control tower that his plane is going down and going down very fast. His final words were, "This is it, baby," as his plane crashes down to the grounds. What do you think the deadliest airplane crash would sound like? Well, you're about to find out. This was a scheduled passenger flight, flying from Anapa Airport to Pulkovo Airport in St. Petersburg. The aircraft crashed in eastern Ukraine, near the Russian border, on 22 August 2006. All 170 people on board were killed. The crash was the deadliest aviation accident in 2006. At the time, it was the deadliest crash in modern Ukrainian history. All the passengers were in a panic, and the pilot's last words were, "Please don't kill us." This captain was mid-air when the first alarm blared, signaling the start of his worst nightmare. This tragic recording starts off the pilot of this plane trying his possible best to take control of his plane, while the alarms of this pilot's plane goes haywire. There was a structural failure mid-air causing the pilots to lose every sort of control over his plane. The terrified voice of the captain could be heard as he screams, "It's the end!" moments before the plane crashed on a mountain, leaving 520 crew and passengers dead. Can you imagine how devastating it would be to have an airplane filled with adults and children who know they are going to die? This plane's passengers did.
Too low terrain. Too low terrain. Too low terrain. Too low terrain.
On April 19, 2000, this plane crashed just minutes before they got to the airport. The crash killed all 124 passengers and 7 crew members. Even till today, it remains the deadliest air disaster in the Philippines. Just halfway of the pilots saying they need to calm down, the plane experienced a terrible crash and explosion. 21 of the victims were never identified and were buried in a mass grave. No one truly understands some of the dangers of flying at night, but this airplane had to sadly experience it. The pilots of this plane were forced to fly over water, specifically the Pacific Ocean, at night with no visual references. They didn't know their true altitude, so they struggled to navigate the aircraft. This all happened because a maintenance worker had failed to remove the tape covering the system ports on the aircraft exterior.
Too low terrain. Too low terrain. Too low terrain.
Sadly, this mistake was one they couldn't recover from because all 70 people on board died. This pilot was cruising mid-air when something very strange happened to his plane, leaving him gasping for breath. As this captain controlled his plane, he heard a loud bang and noticed something just hit his plans. His plane had just collided mid-air with a business jet flying on an opposite heading over the Brazilian state. The co-pilot was frightened to death, but the pilot kept on telling him to keep his calm. The winglets of the business jet sliced off about half of the pilot's left wing, causing the pilot's plane to break up and crash into an area of dense jungle, killing all 154 passengers and crew. Despite sustaining serious damage to its left wing and tail, the business jet landed with its 7 occupants uninjured. This has been tagged the impossible landing. Find out why. This aircraft had no chance of survival, but the pilot did a very heroic move to save a few. Out of the 285 passengers, 184 survived. The crash itself was caused after a failure of the aircraft's tail-mounted engine, but the pilot managed to land the plane, saving most of the lives on the plane. After the crash, an emergency response team was called, and the survivors were quickly rescued.
Plane 19, he's coming down real fast down the south end. Okay, all right, he's on fire. He's down.
This accident is used as an example of what not to do by flight training organizations. Here's why. This FedEx-owned cargo flight crashed while on its final approach to landing. The aircraft hit a hillside from Kuala Lumpur, which led to all 4 occupants being killed. There were several communication errors between the flight crew and the air traffic control, which resulted in the pilots unsure of what to do. While trying to navigate the entire situation, the pilot's last words were recorded. A voice recording captures the final moments of the ATC and a pilot. The sounds are haunting and may stay with you for a long time. The recording begins with the ATC and its pilot talking about the best angle to land the plane. They are calm and focused until something terrible happens. Suddenly, a loud noise interrupts their conversation. Both pilots start to panic, trying to lift the plane and avoid a disaster. But then another loud sound is heard, signaling that the plane has crashed into the ground.
National approach, Army Copter 20723. We'd like to amend back to K-Hop for fuel purposes.
Army 20723 are clear to the Hotel Oscar Papa Airport via direct, maintain 3000.
Clear direct to K-Hop, but we will maintain 3000 for Army Copter 20723.
The pilot admired the beautiful sunset while flying the plane. The colors in the sky were calming, but he didn't realize that trouble was ahead. Out of nowhere, the pilot made an urgent call to the control tower. He explained that two of the plane's engines had stopped working in mid-air, creating a dangerous situation. The pilot urgently said, "Mayday, mayday, mayday," indicating a serious emergency. Despite his efforts to control the situation, the plane started to descend rapidly. Unfortunately, the crash resulted in a tragic loss of many lives.
Land at the Jinnah International Airport. India Today has accessed the exclusive CCTV footage of the crash. These visuals show the plane moments before the crash.
Nothing could go wrong in the first few minutes of takeoff, right? Well, this plane proves otherwise. As the passengers and crew prepared for takeoff, with everyone getting comfortable in their seats and with strapped seatbelts on, something goes terribly wrong. The Delta aircraft crashed during takeoff, killing 14 people out of the 108 on board. As the pilots try their most best to steady the plane, one of the pilots says, "We're not going to make it." And soon after that, the plane comes crashing down. Helicopter crashes are less common, but when they do happen, they can be very deadly, like in this case.
Trailer and a car. It has been pushed off to the shoulder, but now watch out there now, because another flatbed truck is going to have to come to clear it, so yield right of way. Northbound on the BQE, we spot.
Jane Carol Dornacker, on the 22nd of October 1986, was giving her live news report as she usually did. She never would have guessed that would be the last time she would be recording ever.
Lincoln Tunnel looks a lot better for you in New Jersey. Get the water! Hit the water! Hit the water!
The copter experienced a mid-air seizure of the main rotor blades, and the helicopter she was aboard plunged into the Hudson River. Her last words were, "Hit the water, hit the water, hit the water." This passengers just had the shock of their lives, but what happens in this scene would leave you frightened. While the crew and passengers were enjoying their flight, they noticed a very high turbulence in the plane that instincted fear into all their hearts. The plane could be seen visibly shaking as though it was about to make an instant crasher. The pilot then decided to make an emergency landing and asked all crew members to duck their heads very low and brace for impact. Fortunately for the crew members and the passengers, the plane landed safely, and they could all be seen walking out of a lucky dice. This is the deadliest single aircraft accident in aviation history, and it would leave you shocked. This aircraft was carrying 524 people. The crash killed all 15 crew members and 505 of the 509 passengers on board, leaving only 4 survivors. This is one of the most deaths that has ever been recorded in an air crash. The response team arrived late, however. Medical staff later found bodies with injuries, suggesting that people had survived the crash only to die from shock, exposure overnight in the mountains, or injuries that, if tended to earlier, would not have been fatal. This pilot's passengers were at ease, but little did they know that the cockpit calm would soon be shattered by chaos.
Thank you very much. Any wind shear warning?
By 981 negative.
Okay, thank you. And when you look out window, sir, it looks better than before.
The pilot of this plane was heard talking to the control tower and asking them on the navigation during a go-around. The pilot tried to make a quick turn, but little did he know he was about to fall into a greater calamity.
981, Vesa 80020. Visibility 5 kilometers. Ceiling 630 meters.
As the clouds grew thicker and the sight of the pilot got blurry, he tried taking the turn, but unfortunately for him, it wasn't as expected as the plane crashes and fell straight to the grounds, killing all passengers and crew on board. A routine night flight turns into a tragic situation.
Push it up. Push it way up. Way up. Way up. Way up. That's it.
This crash was caused by the pilot's failure to maintain control of the airplane after losing the engine, rather than the accidental shutdown of the engine itself. The pilot and co-pilot are heard from the recording trying to find a way around the situation, but very soon the airplane's emergency alarm starts blazing. All control was eventually lost, and the pilot's last word was, "God." This captain felt invincible, seconds before a faulty engine would change everything.
A first real emergency! I shouldn't be filming this, but...
This video starts with a pilot recording his cruise in his plane, when suddenly, disaster strikes. The pilot is seen struggling with his plane and knows that something is terribly wrong. He pulls up his phone and starts recording everything.
If anything happens, I want everybody to know. I do want to say to my wife and kids.
Once this pilot notices that he is now doomed and has nowhere to run, he starts appreciating his loved ones and thanked them for everything they did for him just minutes before his plane crashed. A crashed aircraft is never good PR for an airline, but this airline suffered terribly for it. On 1st of January 2007, a fatal flight accident occurred after the aircraft crashed into the Makassar Strait near Polewali in Sulawesi. All 102 people on board were killed. As the pilots see that the situation is beyond their control, the only thing they can do is to shout, "Allahu Akbar." All Indonesian airlines were banned from flying into the European Union for several years after the crash. The airline was banned from flying by the Indonesian government in March 2008, and they later declared bankruptcy in June of the same year. This plane took off at midnight and was scheduled to land well before sunrise. But did they ever get to their destination? The flight crashed at Mexico City International Airport in fog after landing on a runway that was closed for maintenance. Of the 89 people on board, 72 were killed, in addition to a maintenance worker who died when the plane struck his vehicle. The pilots, crew, and entire passengers begin to scream as they realize they are about to experience a crash. The last words heard from the pilot is, "Oh, Jesus Christ." A highly experienced pilot and co-pilot were in charge of driving this plane to safety. When the turbulence began, do you think they were able to navigate the situation? Let's find out.
Terrain ahead. Terrain ahead. Pull up. Pull up. Pull up.
The pilots were attempting to land at Smolensk North Airport, a former military airbase, in thick fog. The aircraft descended far below the normal approach path until it hit obstacles on the way and crashed into the ground, coming to rest in a wooded area a short distance from the runway. Sadly, the pilots weren't able to save the plane or the people on it. They screamed their last before the plane crashed, killing all 96 people on board. An engine failure is one of the scariest things that can happen during a flight. How did it turn out for this particular airline? As at the time of this recording, the pilots and co-pilots already knew they couldn't make it. One of the pilots said, "We're dying," and the other said, "Good night and goodbye." They had already accepted their sad fate. The accident was determined to have been caused by the disintegration of an engine shaft due to faulty bearings. This led to a failure of the two left engines and then an onboard fire, both of which eventually destroyed all flight control systems. Clear skies and smooth sailing, until the instruments began to fail, and this captain realized something was horribly wrong. Leaked audio recording shows exactly what happened on this flight in New York. This pilot and his co-worker noticed a system failure while driving their pilot, and then the pilot then asks the co-pilot to put the plane on full power. But what happens next leaves a disastrous scar. Just as the pilot tries going on full power, the rudder of the plane goes haywire, causing the pilots to lose control of the plane. The plane keeps going down, and both pilots try their best, but couldn't stop the disaster that was about to strike. Everyone on board, sadly, lost their lives. This captain notices that one of the part of the plane was faulty mid-air, and what he does next would leave you speechless. This pilot was flying his aircraft, and mid-flight he notices that one engine of his plane had developed a fault. He tries all he could go, save the plane and the passengers, but as soon as he realizes nothing could be done, what he does next would leave you shocked.
وأعتذر منكم جميعا عن هذا الخبر. سوف تقع الطائرة بعد قليل. إنها شهادة أبنائي. لا تنسوا الشهادتين.
He goes to the cabin and calmly informs the passengers that the plane is about to crash. He comforts them and breaks the news to them. It was later found out that there were no survivors on the plane that day. This pilot was on top of the world, minutes before everything began to spiral out of control.
330, we suspect an explosion in the aft compartment of the aircraft. Everything is okay at the moment, but we request descent clearance immediately and firefighting equipment on the ground.
While piloting his plane, the pilot heard a loud sound at the back of the plane when he noticed that a bomb just exploded on the plane. He immediately then calls support and requests for an emergency landing, but things then go very bad for the crew.
338, we have electrical power. CG0. 330, go ahead. Swiss 330, Swiss 330. I cannot read you.
The pilot then tells the support tower that the plane is having electrical problems and he is now losing any sort of control over the plane. He urges them to make an emergency landing to try to help the situations.
We have smoke around back. I can't see anything. 330 is crashing. Goodbye, everybody.
The pilot then alarms the control tower and tells them that he can't see anything because of the smoke. He tells them that his plane is crashing and bids them all goodbye. Unfortunately, there were no survivors on the plane. This pilot's plane guided through the sky, minutes before something strange would be noticed. This scene starts with the pilot and the co-pilot trying to get the correct altitude to take off the plane. The pilot then asks the co-pilot to push forward, needing just a little more momentum to take off properly and climb, But little do they know that their early takeoff was about to turn into a disastrous takedown. Just as the plane tries lifting up, there is a piloting error from the pilot and the co-pilot, which caused the plane to crash back into the grounds. The voice of the pilot and co-pilot could be heard in the recording just before a loud crash is heard too. There was a total of 74 deaths that very day. This captain admires the sunset while piloting his plane, unaware that darkness is about to envelop his flight.
8303 approach. Yes, sir. Appears to be turning left. We'll proceeding back, sir. We have lost engines.
This captain makes a terrifying call to the control tower. He quickly informed them that he needs help, and one of the engines on his plane has stopped functioning mid-air.
Confirm you are carrying out belly landing. Runway available to land at 25. Roger. Clear, mayday, Pakistan 8303. Pakistan 8303.
He begins to tell the control tower, "Mayday, mayday, mayday," signaling a serious life-threatening event is about to occur. Just then, his plane starts crashing to the grounds, leading to the loss of many lives that day. Voice recording captures last moments of this pilot and his crew workers, and what you hear in it may give you chills for a long while. This starts with a pilot and a co-pilot discussing about the right angle to land their plane when something terrible happens. Suddenly, a loud noise is heard, and both pilots starts panicking and tries lifting the plane up from the wreckage, when all of a sudden, another loud sound is heard indicating that the plane had finally crashed to the grounds. Challenger, Hoppajet 823, seemed destined for a smooth journey, but an unpredictable disaster had other plans.
Hoppajet 823, lost both engines, emergency, making an emergency landing. Whoever's got the emergency clear to land.
After the captain notices that not only one, but two of his engines stopped rolling, he immediately calls the control tower to report the situation, but little does he know of what is coming.
Runway 23, is that Hoppajet 823? We're clear to land, but we're not going to make the runway. We've lost both engines.
The pilot then tells the control tower that he is clear to land now, but doesn't think he is going to be able to land just at the runway. The pilot then takes a daring moving, and the plane crashes to the grounds.